Hey there, my name is Joshua Grainer. I'm a men's health specialist and performance and longevity specialist. And today starts the first of a series of talks and essays that I'm doing on optimizing male hormonal health. And basically, how this works is every week I'm going to release a new portion, a new chapter from my practical guide for male hormone optimization, and that's going to be released as part of my newsletter every week. And then after the readers have had a chance to read it and think about it, then I've opened it up for an AMA. So then you just send your questions into me, and then the following week I review the essay that I wrote, that portion about the male hormone guide, and then answer any questions that came to me. So I've got a couple questions from this last article, and this last article that I did is actually entitled "How to Optimize Your Hormones: A Guide for Men 40 and Over." And you can access that directly on my website. I'll put a link down in the comments below, or in the notes below. But you can also find me on Medium. So those are two different ways you can access everything that I'm writing on this topic. So let's get started. So, one of the reasons that I'm diving into this is because there's no topic in men's health that's more controversial and I think poorly understood than male hormonal health. And if we compare that to women's health and how much knowledge and research has gone into understanding that, men's health, in contrast, really hasn't had as much advancements in understanding. And one of the things that's central to this is this idea of testosterone. Although testosterone is just one molecule, it's just one hormone that's part of a panoply, a whole bunch of hormones and chemicals that are working, processes that are working in the male body. And the reason that I'm really tackling this and focusing on this really intensely for the next couple months or so is because as we age, especially as we cross the 40-year-old thresholds, our hormones begin changing a lot. And as those change, so goes our mood, changes in body composition, and we have higher risks for certain types of diseases, like prostate cancer, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, things like that, dementia. So my hope is that by going into this and going into it into detail and providing some evidence and providing some research and being able to give you a framework for understanding how your hormones work and how to optimize them, that we can use that as an entry point into the rest of your health. Because, from what I've been studying and in my estimation, hormonal health really is the tide that lifts all ships. So in this guide, what we'll be doing, we'll be focusing on is obviously increasing your hormonal health, but we're going to be visiting this through periodically going through different topics. The first one we're going to do is how your hormone system works, and then introducing you to different forms of hormone testing, talking really critically about testosterone replacement therapy, who it's appropriate for, who it's not, and talking about different alternatives to testosterone replacement, things that we can eat, and different types of exercises we can do to boost testosterone levels and to balance our hormone health. Different tips to improve prostate and sexual health and libido as we age, and why it is that testosterone levels in men are decreasing faster than normal across the globe. Right. So we'll go into this, and we'll also get into some really juicy myths and controversies. Things like how sex, porn, and masturbation affects testosterone, the relationship between mental health and hormonal health, the effect of alcohol, cannabis, caffeine, and other drugs on testosterone, the role of estrogen for male sexual health, supplementation, other things that you can take to boost testosterone, and the use, the benefits and dangers of different types of experimental methods, things like peptides and selective androgen receptor modulators, and other experimental methods for improving physical and sexual performance, and looking at the pros and cons, the dangers and the benefits. So this is a lot, and as I've started to write this guide, originally it started out as something that I was like, oh, this is only gonna be like 20 pages long. It's gonna be super simple. But as I've dived into the research and as I've really been learning about this, from the ground up, because, unfortunately, this isn't something that we learn a lot about in our medical training, regardless of what our medical training is. When I talk to people, urologists and proctologists, people who are supposed to be specialists in this type of medicine, unfortunately, a lot of times their knowledge really comes up short. They're not able to answer a lot of my questions. So I've gone into the research for myself and am unpacking these things so that way you can have access to all this information as well. And I'm doing this for free. This is part of my no cost to consumer efforts to improve health, especially for men. Because, let's face it, as guys, we don't really go to the doctor very often. And unless, we're bleeding or unless our dick's not working, then, there, a lot of times there's no reason for us to go to the doctor. But I think it's really important that we start changing the way that we approach men's health. Preventing a disease in the future, increasing our performance in the future, thinking about how we want to live and the quality of our life in the future is not weakness, right? That's just planning. In the same way that we do financial planning to reverse engineer our longevity, to reverse engineer our finances for retirement, we can do the same thing for our longevity. And so that's a process I'm going to be taking you through as well. So in this article, I introduced a 4-step framework to optimize your hormones. And the first step is to measure and assess your hormones. The second is to learn about your specific needs, and an encouragement to not be your own doctor, to find good professional help, somebody to collaborate with. The second is to build a foundation for long-term health, instead of just focusing on, what's happening right now, what performance goals do I have immediately, thinking about your performance in the long term and your health in the long term, thinking about lifespan and health span, not just immediate performance. And then the fourth part of the framework is to use what works and discard the rest, to have a very pragmatic approach to optimizing your health in general, but more specifically, male hormonal health. So how I'll go through this is, of course, you can read this article on your own. It's just a 5 to 6 minute read, but I'm just going to answer a couple questions that I've gotten from the community as a way to introduce you to this 4-step framework, right? So the first one, with measure and assess, I have a question here. What specific tests are we looking for? And what happens if our doctor isn't able to prescribe or isn't able to suggest these different lab tests? Okay. One way to think about it is that you are the general contractor of your health. Even if your doctor doesn't prescribe or order specific lab tests for your hormones, because most doctors will a lot of times just assess total testosterone, which can be useful, but it's only useful if taken into context with other things like free testosterone, a type of binding globulin called sex hormone binding globulin, looking at your DHEA levels, looking at your prolactin levels, looking at your estrogen, looking at your luteinizing hormone and your follicle stimulating hormone, looking at your thyroid levels, right? When taking all those things into consideration, then we get a better idea of what your total hormonal health is. But unfortunately, what a lot of doctors, when they think about men's health and hormones, they focus just only on total testosterone, which is limited. So a lot of times, if you're going to get your hormones tested, you have to ask for these other tests specifically. Things like the thyroid, they'll usually order that, but other things like sex hormone binding globulin, free testosterone, percent free testosterone, luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, those type of things, a lot of doctors will consider those specialty tests, although they're not. And fortunately, they're very inexpensive. So I've actually created a document, or it's a series of documents called Men's Health Cheat Sheet, which I'll also put a link down in the notes below. And that will actually show all the different labs including the reference ranges, and not just the reference ranges about like, what does the average person have. It's we're looking at what's the optimum level for each of these different parameters. And it's got a whole bunch of other things in there. It's got exercise tips, it's got dietary tips, it's got a bunch of stuff in there. But specifically for the labs, and to answer this question, if your doctor doesn't know or is unwilling, or if you don't have a primary care doctor to order these labs for you, you can also order them yourself. There are some different consumer-based labs that have a lot of these tests already built in. One is called Inside Tracker, and I'll actually put a link to that service below. Or if you want to, you can reach out to me and I can order these labs for you for a pretty small fee. So you have a bunch of different options for assessing, measuring and assessing, because we say in functional medicine, don't guess, assess. Once you know exactly what your body needs, then you can put together an adequate plan. So that brings us to the next part of the framework, which is learn about your needs and don't be your own doctor. And again, this has more to do with, it's good to have a collaborator. It's good to have somebody that you can rely on, somebody who can help you make sense of the information. And in the article I write that I'm not my own physician, even though I've got a lot of medical training and I really understand a lot of the nuances around men's health and performance. I make certain decisions for myself, but when it comes to big decisions, especially around the taking and prescribing of drugs, I will seek out medical advice. I've got a medical team that I work with, and these are the people who are looking over my shoulder to make sure that the different choices that I'm making actually make sense. Because, we all have bias, and, it's hard for me to be objective enough to make really good decisions. So, one of the things that'll help to train you how to do throughout the course of the series is how to be a good general contractor for your health, and also how to put together a good healthcare team. The next part of the framework is to build a solid foundation for long-term health. If your primary focus is only on, I want to increase muscle mass, I want to increase muscular hypertrophy, I just want to make my physique look better, or I want to lose a certain amount of weight, there's nothing wrong with that. But if that's your primary focus, if that's your only focus, and it's not a piece of the puzzle, it's not part of a larger plan to get you to someplace else, then it's really going to be limited. And the likelihood that you're going to maintain those efforts and those changes, right? I'm not going to say you, but I've been doing this long enough to see that when people are focused on the short term, a lot of times they'll reach their short-term goals, and then that progress will peter off. And the reality is, if you want to be within the top 10, top 5 percentile for health, mobility, cognitive health, mental health, all of that, as we age, as we cross the 65-year threshold, 75, 85-year threshold, we really need to start pushing ourselves into that top 5 and 10 percentile now, while we're still relatively young and we still have a lot of vitality to do that. So by building a solid foundation for your health, by focusing on long-term goals, by figuring out what are the deficiencies within your life, within your health program, within your fitness, by figuring out what those are and being able to fill in the blanks, then you have a more comprehensive, stronger foundation to build your performance upon. And the last aspect of the framework is to use what works and discard the rest. And this comes back to systematically, for one, being systematic with your assessing and with your progress, but also paying attention to what works. Try not to make too many changes at the same time. So this way you know what's moving the needle, right? So you might be saying, okay, how does all of this affect and improve my hormonal health? And my answer to that is that hormones are, we can think of hormones as a crossing place through which all aspects of your health pivot. It's like a fulcrum. And at the same time, so many different aspects of our health, from our sleep, the food that we eat, the type of exercise that we do, the type of relationship that we're in, the type of stress that we're experiencing, all of that stuff affects our hormones. So there is a feedback loop between our hormones and our health, between our behaviors, between our actions, between our mental health. All these things work together. And my goal with this series is to help you to explore each of these different things and to do it in a systematic way. So that way it makes sense. So this way you can start being the general contractor for your health, and you can start making choices and changes and working together with your healthcare team and your healthcare provider in order to increase your health, vitality, longevity well into the future. Okay, so that's it for today. Look out for the next video in this series. All right, see you soon.